Kevin here, top 100 financial advisor, two-time author, one-time bestseller, and we are here to talk about the stock market. For years and years now, it has always been a fact that putting money away for rent or renting is just throwing your money away and buying your house. Your primary residence is the best investment you can make. I contend that is wrong for the vast majority of people, and that when we do the math for it, people aren't doing the math the right way and not understanding what is actually going on. So we're going to break that down. Also, pay very, very close attention to the words that I am using. Your primary residence. If you have some rental properties, I like those. If you're renting out a portion of your house for Airbnb, that changes the math. That's usually a good idea. I think in most cases, I would like to buy a house to pass on to my kids. That's not the best investment. I can make more money other places. And that's what the conversation is. Your primary residence that you just live in and do nothing else, is it the best investment? Could you make the most money? So I'm going to break this down. The numbers I'll add the link to where I'm getting these from. This is a real life example from someone, actually a few articles that really break down all the math that shows you that it's not always what you think. So let's break it down. I'll show you the math mistake that most people make. All right, so let's go ahead, pull up the whiteboard, and let's break it all down. All right, so in this example, or in this scenario rather, the person here, and actually another person was kind of cool. So they bought the house in 2014. And they sold the house this year in 2020. So they had the house for 6 years. Now, I think you tend to make the most money after about 7 to 10 years. So in my view, probably sold a bit early, but that's aside from the point. So they bought the house for $500. Let's just say buy, since I can't get that up. All right, here we go. So they bought it for $510,000. They sold for $672,500. All right. So at this point, most people would say, well, obviously you made $172,500. This is why I buy all the time. It makes me money. If you're a renter, you threw that money away and that was it. This is where people mess up. Because a lot of people, the first thing they tell you is, well, my home appreciated. My home last year was worth this much and now it's worth this much. I check it every year. My home appreciated. It's the best investment I ever made. Do the math, because this is not actually what's going on. What actually happened is, in this case, and in most people's case, there's a loan involved. And the 172 you think you have, or the 672,000 that you think you have, a lot of that goes back to the bank. So in this case, the loan was $407,000, which means that they had a down payment of $103,000. That's a pretty big down payment. You add these two numbers up here and here, you get $510,000. So at the end of this, or by the time they sold, the loan balance, let's do it this way. The loan balance was $353,713, which means, because you have the loan and the equity, right? So you really start off with $103,000 in equity. But at the end of it, because the lower the loan, the higher the equity, the value of the home is $672. So that means that my equity now, the cash I've put in, is now $318,787. Now this looks very, very good, right? You add these two numbers up, add this, this is where we get the 672. My loan is lower, my equity is higher, it equals a much higher price. So this is great, but there's something that you need to realize. So your equity did grow, that is great. However, you have to realize that you put in $103,000. So the gain in equity minus 103, that gives me $215,787. And that is a gain in equity. This is good. And in fact, this is why you don't want to say, I bought it for this much, I sold it for this much, because that's only like 170,000 or so. This is where the real money is. This looks way more impressive. You made $215,787 in 6 years. That feels like a very, very good investment. However, this is not the entire case. Anytime that you sell something and you have a gain, you want to consider, what did you pay for this? During the entire 6 years, what were you paying in taxes? What were you paying in maintenance, HOA fees? All of those things do cut into those gains. I know my parents added on a whole other storage to the house, added a fence, added a deck, knocked down a wall, added a room, all that stuff. That costs money. So in this case, again, real numbers, I'll break down some of their biggest expenses. They have a list of all the expenses. I'll add the link to that, but we'll take this gain, right? And we'll just circle that. All right. So what were some of the expenses that they paid over 6 years, not in 1 year, over 6 years expenses? Right. So their expenses, they paid $77,162 in interest. You know, when you pay back a loan, the bank makes money. You just threw away, because a renter is not paying this, right? You threw away $77,162 over 6 years. What else did you do? Well, HOA fees. You're not getting that back. That's $22,680 that they paid. Taxes. You also paid that. That is $33,392. They had maintenance of $13,000. This could include, let me put maintenance. And we're just going to abbreviate here. This one was taxes, property taxes to be specific, and then HOA. And we'll put over 6 years. Okay. And then commission, because when you sell the house, you got to pay the person who helped you sell it. And in this case, it was $33,612. All right. So overall, and this is just the biggest expense, but from there, the numbers that they have, they paid a total of $210,646 and expenses. You made, and I'll do it this way. You made $215, you spent $210 over 6 years. So your total profit is only $5,141 in 6 years. That's it. That's all you made. For all of that stuff, for all of that, for 6 years, you made $5,141. That is not a great investment. That's actually less than 1% per year. That's it. And you may be thinking, well, the mortgage, right? In some cases, a lot of people say, well, if you can pay mortgage, you can pay, or I'm sorry, if you can pay rent, you can pay mortgage. Well, the mortgage doesn't always factor in stuff like this. Mortgage doesn't always factor in stuff like that, because these are things even after the home is paid for in 30 years. This stuff right here, this continues, and a renter is not paying these, period. You are always, I'm sorry, so actually, no, interest fees actually do drop off, so sorry about that. You're always gonna have to pay taxes. Worst case scenario, right? You're gonna be paying taxes, you're gonna be paying maintenance. So just comparing the rent, and people say, well, it was cheaper to buy the house because the mortgage was cheaper than the rent. That's not the whole thing. You want to compare the entire thing. Well, what is the maintenance that you're going to do? What happens if you don't have a warranty? You have to pay for a roof or floors. All that stuff counts. All of that stuff counts. But for you to get a profit of just $5,000, that ain't nothing, right? So here's the thing. In this scenario, with their actual numbers, $210,646, if you spread that out evenly across 6 years, that's a total of, what was it? I think it was close to $35,000 per year. So let's say this was you, and if you could pay these expenses, you could have also saved or invested that in other areas, right? Because you are definitely paying those taxes. You're definitely paying those interest costs, because it needed to be paid, right? You didn't have a choice. It was coming out of your account in one way, shape, or form. And obviously the commissions you're not paying that every year, but we're just taking it, spreading it out, and just saying, what if, I had the money, basically, what if I had invested this money instead? Because it was money I would have already spent. If I had the money to buy, and I would have bought instead of renting, I had the money somewhere, because again, these things would have been paid. So if I did that for $35,000 a year, and I just said every year, what I would have did in maintenance, every year, what I would have paid in interest, what I would have paid in taxes in this area, if I did that, how much money would I have? So if I did that in an index fund, 6 years, index funds, that's something that owns pretty much all the stocks at once. One of the best, easiest investments for most people to get into. If you did that, $35,000 a year from 2014, and I'll just do this, 2014 to 2020, even with the pandemic and all the other stuff we've been through since then, if you did that, you'd have $356,000. Easy. Liquid. Don't have to, when you sell it, you're really not paying nobody outside of taxes, which are usually a bit cheaper if you have the long-term capital gains. And that's just the easiest bare minimum investment you could have done. If you did, let's say, a Nike, same time frame, same money, Nike, $490,000 over the same period, same amount of money. Okay. What if I did a Netflix? All this stuff is exactly the same. $873,000. Hard to talk and write at the same time. If you did something like Tesla, Tesla's all over the place. You did something like Tesla, $2.2 million. So when it comes to investing the money, I don't think buying a home is your best investment. Now, you could argue, and I think this makes sense too, what if this is a one-time scenario? What if you bought in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my hometown? What if you buy in Atlanta? What if you buy in Nebraska? What if you buy in New York City? All of those things are factors to consider, which is why I say do the math and do the real hard math of, what am I paying back in the loan? How much did my equity grow? And what are the other fees and taxes and interest, HOA fees, whatever improvements you did to the home, because that is an expense too. What are those expenses? And then say, how much did I actually make? And then the next question is, how much did I make compared to what I could have used this other money for? Because in this case, and I really implore you to do that type of math, just because say I bought it for this and sold it for this, that really doesn't tell you anything. That hides a whole bunch of items that nobody really talks about. So when you do that math, and in this case, they made $5,000, you could make 10 or 15,000 if you're in Oklahoma, perhaps, right? Taxes could be lower. Commission may not be as high. All those things you want to consider. You do have to do the math. But in this case, and in many, many, many cases, when you do that, you'll see that you might have made more money renting for cheaper, because in a rental scenario, in the case that they had, rent would have been $2,400 plus, I think it was plus insurance, and they only want to spend about $172,800 if I'm not mistaken. Well, that's less than $210,000 that you just you threw away and got nothing out of it. You don't get nothing really out of the taxes, and especially you don't get nothing out of the 77,000 that you spent in interest over that time. Even if you just said, I'm going to take what I would have paid in interest that I'm not paying when I'm renting and invested that money, you probably still would have been better off. Guaranteed, you would have been better off than the $5,000 that you would have $5,000 that you would have paid in profits, or I'm sorry, that you would have made in profit during that time. Even if you don't do that, because some people say, well, look, well, over the after 30 years, I'm better off because now I have whatever the mortgage payment was, whatever the taxes, we still going to pay property taxes, but the HOA fees, whatever you're not paying, let's say just the mortgage that you're not paying, I can now invest that. Well, guess what? After 6 years, in the case of Tesla, I already got $2.2 million in 6 years. In 30, you're not catching up. You're not catching up after that. And that's assuming Tesla is what we think it is. Even for a Netflix, in 6 years, you're telling me, or Nike rather, after 6 years, I got basically $500,000. And you wait for 30 years and you're going to try and catch up, then you're not going to catch up. So again, buying a home is probably a good purchase, your primary residence. So don't come in here and say, well, I got a rental property or I rent out half my house. Well, yeah, that's different. I think that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But as an investment, do the math and compare how much am I really making if I were to sell, if I sold, versus what if I took taxes and interest and all these other fees and invested that money somewhere else, because you spent the money anyway. People say that renters are throwing away money. What did you really get out of the interest and taxes that you've been paying? Not a whole lot, right? So you want to really compare, really do the math. Don't bash people who own homes. I'm not. Like I said, I'll probably buy a home within the next year or so, just because I want the purchase, not because I'm looking to make the most money. And don't bash renters. People have been killing renters this whole time saying you're throwing your money away, and nobody sat here and said, well, you've been throwing your money to the bank and for interest. You've been throwing money for taxes this whole time. For what? For what? Your fridge goes out. Guess who's paying for that? You are, if you own. You want to redo the carpet and all that kind of stuff. Guess what? You paying for that. So yes, you can get a warranty, and maybe that can offset, and maybe that helps you. Maybe that improves the numbers. But again, just do the numbers, and before you call it an investment, or particularly a good investment, do the math and let the math do the talking. I sat there and pulled up. At first, people, I'm sure y'all were like, oh my God, what was $172,000 at first? Sounds great. Well, not really, because that's a big part of that is a loan. Then you want to take out what you already put in. You really didn't make all that much. And a lot of people will say, and I'll pull it up here, and unless they can show you a spreadsheet or a scratch paper of what the math actually looks like, they probably don't know. Because a lot of people, I guarantee you, most people don't know what these costs are over the lifetime of the home. They don't, because not many people are tracking this. Just like they don't track how many oil changes you've paid for, right? How many tires have you paid for the life of your car? You probably don't know. You haven't kept up with that for however many years you've had the car. But for example, some people also just tell you this and just hone in on this number. I made $200,000. It's the best investment I ever made. Ask them how much they paid in interest. Ask them how much they paid in taxes. Ask them how much they paid in maintenance during the entire lifetime of the home. They probably don't know that. So you don't know. You do not know if it is a good investment unless you have done this. And when you have done this, you can determine whether it's a good investment or it hasn't. For some people, it will be. For some people, it will be a good investment, and it'll be hopefully, I don't know, $50,000, and hopefully we can add some zeros there. For many of us, if you're flipping a house, different story. You're renting a house, different story. Commercial property, different story. But any of us could have done better given the exact same scenario. If I had $103,000 in cash, that I could have done a whole bunch better than this. Most people would have. So my thing is, at the end of the day, a house can be a good thing to buy. It may not be your best investment. Those are two separate things. Good thing to buy, maybe for some of us, but not the best investment. Your primary home. I have to keep saying it because some people keep coming at me and tell me all this stuff, like your primary home, just the house you're living in, might be a good thing to buy, not the best investment. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.